Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. I'm super excited to welcome my friend and mentor, Mr. Bud George, to the show. Bud is actually my team leader at, I guess what was Parks, now Parks Compass.
All the above, correct.
We've got how many folks on our team? About 15?
15
15 of us.
Admin.
On our team. And so it has just been a tremendous joy to kind of sit under your leadership over the past 3 years, and get to know the other 14 members of our team there. Kind of a quick personal story of how Bud and I met originally was not centered around real estate. And honestly, I think until probably this year, you were still in my phone as where you can put company or whatever. I usually put like something that'll help me remember. So you were Bud George, Mac Run Group. And so,
which is 10 years ago.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to remember. I mean, when I kind of initially moved into Murfreesboro, I got connected with Rod Key and these folks that were meeting up at the Mac and running. And so that's where we originally connected. And so then, fast forward to 21, I'm, exploring getting into real estate. And some folks said, well, you need to talk to Bud George. And so, you weren't looking for people to add to your team and necessarily. And we met for coffee a few times. And I think you and I both realized pretty quickly that there was a lot of synergy as far as shared values and beliefs and just,
acid crossed or
places
these weird
we had
connections.
Worked and that's right.
Lived in
Hendersonville connections and
right.
Just I was like, okay, maybe the Lord's doing something here that we need to listen to. So anyways, I just kind of like to share connections there at the outset of these of how we first got to know each other. So as we kind of move into, the purpose of the podcast, so to speak, obviously this is Legacy Builders. And so one of the things that I ask every one of our guests to kind of, in some ways, kick off the conversation, serves as a conversation starter, is to talk about legacy. And so when you think about the word legacy, what does it mean to you? And it's kind of a two-part question. So what does it mean to you? And then how has that idea of legacy shaped the way that you approach work and life? And it may be the same.
Yeah. There's so many things my mind goes to, but probably it goes to a place. And that place for me is the National Cemetery on Gallatin Road at Briley Parkway. So Hendersonville boy, but the longer story of that history would be that my parents are West Nashvillians. Back in the day when it meant something if you were from East Nashville or West Nashville or North Nashville. Nashville was a lot smaller community in the 40s when my parents came into the world. And I was born into West Nashville in 67. Since you said I was a mentor, that means I'm several years older than you, I guess. I don't know if that's required, but in this case it is. But the National Cemetery is where my dad's buried. And it's a place that is a quiet place for me to reflect. Mm-hmm. And there's a book that's called From Beginning to End. It's written by a guy named Robert Fulghum. He wrote some funny books It was on fire when I lay down on it was one of his books. And so this is not his most famous book, but here's what I remember about that book, because it was talking about the rhythms of our life. And there's a picture on the back cover of that book that is him sitting in a cemetery on a freshly dug grave and just looking out over the cemetery. It happens to be his grave, and he's a healthy guy.
Wow.
I'm guessing he's probably around my age now. I read this book. The book was written in the 90s, and I think I read it in the early 2000s. But it was a place where he would think about what people were going to say about him when his life was over, which when I read that question, boom, that's what I thought about.
Yeah.
The reason I go to the National Cemetery is my dad is ashes are buried there. He served in Vietnam. He was actually in Vietnam when I was born.
Wow.
So it's not a eerie place for me, and it's not even anything, it's a quiet place for me.
Yeah.
Something about the rows of headstones at a national cemetery and something about that place,
Yeah.
I can get still. So it's a regular place for me to go just to reflect and think. Years ago, I sat there one day and I was trying to figure out the answer to this question for me.
Yeah.
What's important to me? And I started writing words down of what words I wanted to be tied to my legacy. Mm-hmm. The two words that rose to the top that day were inspire and excellence. And so I want to be a person that inspires excellence. Oftentimes that goes to my career. The older I get, the more I realize career has very little to do with it. Mm-hmm. Now, I do want to inspire excellence in my career. You hear me preach that quite a bit at the office, but it's more about coming alongside people and doing life well.
Yeah.
And that continues to evolve over time. I used to think that meant changing the world, and that's not near as important to me. Now it's a smaller and smaller group of people that I want to do life with. Yeah. Sometimes I'm doing life with people for a very short period of time. Our paths cross. Maybe it's work, maybe it's not. I somehow make a difference in their life, giving them permission to be everything that God created them to be. Mm-hmm. One other event related to that, not that same day that I came up with those two words, inspiring excellence, but I went back there on the day that I was 49, 4 months, and 1 day old. Little known fact, the people that maybe people that do know me know this, I'm a numbers geek. So I calculated the number of days my dad was on this earth. So when I was 27, he died at 49 years old, 4 months, and 1 day. Wow. So November the 29th of 2016, I went back there that day.
Wow.
And I thought, every day I have past this day is more days than my dad lived on this earth. Wow. And so they're gifts, if you will.
Absolutely.
And so let's make the most of them.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought of when you said legacy, most people that have been around church know John 10:10, that Jesus said, I came that you may have life and have it to the full, or abundant life, or life to abundance. And abundance doesn't mean possessions. It doesn't mean, money, fame, fortune. It's full life. And so when I think of the word inspiring excellence, the part of that verse that we don't often talk about is the beginning of that verse, which says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And so what we find in the world, where the world says you can have it all,
right,
that abundance is not life-giving. It's really stealing
exhausting,
true life. And every day I wake up, I realize there's more that I thought was important that's not important, and that I thought would give me life and freedom that doesn't give me life and freedom. And so now that legacy piece for me, it keeps going back to how can I figure out more to live that full life, and in so living, invite other people into that life that is truly abundant and free
Yeah.
and at peace and where joy is found. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Whether I've got 1 day or 100 more days or 1,000 more days or 50 more years.
Yeah.
And not promised any of those.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I mean, we could just end right there.
Done.
I mean, that was
That's
so
good.
good. I love
Wow.
that. And some of that I didn't know. So I appreciate.
I can be
Your-
done now.
your
I wanted one thing new that Matt didn't know before we got here. So
That's so good. Well, I think, and what I appreciate about you is your authenticity and also your vulnerability. That a lot of people, not on the team may not get to see all the time. I mean, you're not saying you're not authentic, but your vulnerability and is something that I appreciate because I mean, you have been in real estate and you've lived a lot of life but you've been in real estate, what, almost 30 years, going on 30 years.
going on 28 yeah.
And so from where I sit, I'm like, well, I mean, my goodness. I mean, you have every reason to be the puffed up chest and I know all the answers but I think what I appreciate about the way that you lead is in humility and how, our team, I think if I reflect on 2024 as a team, I think our word is probably collaboration. I don't know what your word would be as
one
a
of them,
team,
yeah.
but I mean, I think that's what I have appreciated so greatly is, look, whether you've been in the business 1 year or whether you've been in the business 28 years, we all have something that we can learn from each other in that.
Yeah. No, that word, we talk about it a lot. Our group text is the BGRE, Bud George Real Estate Collab group text. And it is like most of life and most of business and those of us that are in sales, it can be a lonely place. And we just decided to do it together, and it makes us better. And once again, the more I know, the more I don't know. And putting another set of eyes on a question or a situation or drama in our industry or whatever just adds value, which is ultimately that's, if we can add value to our clients from a real estate perspective, then that's a win for everybody.
Yeah.
And we learn along the way, and we don't have all the answers, and we don't ever want to promise to have all the answers, but we will seek answers and seek wisdom, and there's wisdom in numbers. So.
Yeah. So let's dive a little bit into your journey to real estate, and because for those of that don't know, you have a seminary degree.
Yeah, big, important Master of Arts in Religious Education.
But
not sure
but
what.
Let's talk about out of high school, and what you wanted to do, and then how you kind of found yourself in real estate. I'd love for you to just kind of share a little bit about
I'm looking at the clock and
professional-
wondering how long that this could go. So we'll give the elevator part of this. So you heard the West Nashville part of the journey, entered the world in 1967. And the first 2 years of my life was in West Nashville, then Atlanta, Georgia. Go Braves. That was till I was 6 or 7 years old. And about that time, my dad took a job teaching school at Ball State Community College,
Yeah.
the very first
Gallatin.
year that it opened. And so parents being from West Nashville, grandparents still living in West Nashville, Hendersonville became new suburb, basically.
Yeah.
People don't believe that, but yeah, Hendersonville was a lot smaller than it was, in 1972 or 3. So all my grown-up days that I remember are Hendersonville, and that was Beach High School, the other high school when there was only 2. So an 85 graduate of Beach, and then on to UT Martin to college. Met my wife, And West Tennessee girl, Leanne and I were married 35 years ago in 1989. Moved back to Hendersonville after getting married, and found myself at a place where you were, First Baptist Church Hendersonville, which was my home church, and left there in 91 after Leanne finished college and headed off to Fort Worth, Texas for seminary. And we did youth ministry and education and administration at churches for a few years. And then found myself in my late 20s, right around 30, going, I'm not going to be at church staff for a season. And what am I going to do? What Dad was teaching at Vol State part of the time and what he did as a career was land surveying. And back in the day, before technology, a land surveyor had to go to the courthouse and research deeds and sift back through the history of adjoining properties to try to establish on paper what we might find in the field when we were starting to look for rock piles or fence rows or making up acreage tracts or even residential lots. But it was all done at a courthouse. Yeah. Fascinating for a kid to get to go do that and see that. So that was one of my options of, hey, let's go back and do surveying. And I did some forestry work, but then I was like, maybe real estate. I love people. I love helping people. I love, remembering searching deeds, that part of it. And so there at 30, we jumped in. And I guess the rest is history, as they say, related to that. But that's kind of how I found real estate in 1997.
Did you start in Murfreesboro? So you guys moved to Murfreesboro from
Texas to Murfreesboro, and we're sitting there with our now 31-year-old, and our 27-year-old had just been born. And we could have planted back in West Tennessee, closer to my wife's family. We could have gone back to Hendersonville. I mentioned that my dad had passed at 49, so that was in that season. So there wasn't much left in Hendersonville. My mom was living in Murfreesboro at that time. We decided, and probably the best decision we ever made for our family was to plant in Murfreesboro. Yeah. And so we launched a career in a city that I didn't know too many people. Now people are like, well, you're from here. I'm like, I'm not from here. I may be from here longer than you've been from here, depending on how long you've been here, but I am not one of those original Rutherford County guys. But we have been here now 30 years, right about this time in 94. So
another kind of fun, interesting connection is, so I guess in 21, not long after I'd gotten my license, I'm helping some really good friends of ours buy a house. It was still gangbusters at this time where, multiple
you
offers.
better buy it yesterday or it's not going to be here. Yeah.
And so I remember taking them to this house over near Siegel. And, we looked at the kitchen counter and there's like 20 or 30, agents' cards laying on there. And they, of course, they love the house. And I remember calling you and talking about that. And lo and behold, it was Courtney Yates was the listing agent, her and her husband. And I remember finding out in that conversation that Courtney, had helped you find a house when you moved to Murfreesboro. Right. Yeah. And so I just
Courtney has probably helped most of the agents in Murfreesboro buy their first house in Murfreesboro, and now we were licensed. But
but I just thought I'm doing that the same was like thing. A really cool. Here I was in my first kind of transaction, and Courtney's the agent, and that was who helped you. So it was just kind of a cool little moment.
Small world
moment.
Yeah,
it really was. And so, let's talk a little bit about your role so you've been in the real estate business almost 28 years, and so in that time you actually worked for Parks Corporate for Bob, training new agents. So as new agents came in, you kind of oversaw their development, and so talk a little bit about that role at Parks.
And probably the reason I've got a team now, if you kind of put all these things together that we talked about, what am I here for? As best I understand, to come alongside a handful of people over their lives, and sometimes that's a long team relationship. Some of the folks have been on the team now 15 years. Sometimes it's a very short relationship with somebody in a transaction that we're hanging out together for a month or two. But I had this desire for coaching and training, and we were in a coaching and training program within 3 or 4 years of being in the business. We had this national program in, and I was like, this is good stuff. Like, this makes us better. And we started working in a small group of agents from different offices within the company, and that led into Bob Parks, a dear friend of mine, inviting me into a corporate role. And so I left the sales side from 2006 through the end of 2010. And so after about 9 years of selling, I moved into that. Towards the end of 10, I said, I see some changes coming in the industry. I think I can have a bigger impact back in the trenches, if you will. Seeing how it's going to change closer to the front lines. So I moved back out of the corporate world into sales, and I'm still going, how do I coach? I want to coach. Do I have a coaching business on the side, and the team really fulfills that for me. So my main source of income is still helping buyers and sellers purchase real estate, sell real estate, sometimes do both of those at the same time, which we could talk about how fun that can be, how dramatic that can be. But then I get to coach agents and come alongside them, and that's where the collaborative team comes in. So that is, you hear me say this to the agents every year. If it's not a win-win, then we don't need to be on the same team. Like, I want it to be a win for you, but I want to add more value than I give. And it seems to have worked well. That we don't have a lot of turnover on the team. And it continues to become more and more collaborative. And I think we're all growing together, both in life and in real estate. So that's kind of how the team provides me, the coach in me gets a lot of chance to give back, I guess, from a team standpoint.
So talk a little bit about the evolution of the team. So, how did you, I know you talked about your leadership role at Parks, kind of after that was over, so to speak, you were kind of trying to fill a void in some ways of like, I really have this gift and I have this desire to coach and mentor and give back. So that kind of birthed it. So talk a little bit about, putting the team together and then how it's evolved in the 15 years since you started it. Because I think some people in the real estate business may, from the outside looking in, think, why in the world would you want a team? Or
and there are probably as many different types of teams as there are teams.
Right.
Every
exactly.
one of them looks different. So it probably started because I needed some help. We'd have a busy season, and so we're coming out of the Great Recession. I get back in contact. Hopefully I'd stayed in contact with some of the people that had made a difference in my business those first 10 years. So as business starts to pick up, I need a little bit of help. So we talk about it continuously being in beta testing because we're always changing. But there was a young lady named Madison Cox was new in the business. She starts helping me be two places at one time. that's working pretty good. I'm helping her with her business, and then we need admin help. So we have a part-time admin. Then somebody says, hey, could you help me grow my business? So the second person, Kristen Trout, was the second person who left this earth about a year ago, but dear friend John Trout of mine, so there we were, 4 of us. And really, like you said, I've not looked to grow it. It has been a friend of a friend. It has been, there's been a reason where you look back and there were a couple seasons in there where we grew a little too fast and we had to drop back and make some adjustments and help people figure out we were still friends, but we needed to go in 2 different directions. But we kind of, I guess.
I'm glad we haven't had that conversation yet.
Well, we'll talk about that after. No, I'm kidding. But really, over the past 7 or 8 years, on average, maybe a person per year. But we've gone 3 years now.
Yeah.
With no changes.
Yeah, I think when I was talking to you, I think you hadn't added anybody in a year and a half.
Handful, yeah,
almost 2 years.
So that really it's the majority of my business now is by referral only.
Yeah.
There was a program out there for years, and that was their trademark, but it took somebody having done business with me or knowing somebody that had done business with me for generally. And I just trust once or twice a year I'm going to get a new stranger to add to that list. But the majority of my business is just, hey, Bud George is somebody you need to talk to, like you found me.
Right.
And that's how the team has grown too. So we just kind of, there is not an exact science to it. There's a little bit of head knowledge, a little bit of heart knowledge, and here we are.
That's good. So let's talk a little bit about your kind of personal values and community engagement, and just kind of reflect a little bit on kind of your family background, your value system, and how that influences your approach to real estate.
What we talked about at the very beginning with it's not a discontent, and I'm learning the difference between be content in all things, but always looking for excellence. So balancing that, it's not that I'm never satisfied, but I know that I got things to learn about who I am and all the broken parts of me, mistakes I will continue to make, and where what I thought was important stuff is not near as important. So I think that probably impacts as much of my how I run my team, we haven't mentioned my grandkids. We have talked for 30 minutes and we haven't mentioned my grandkids. So life changes when you find out you're going to be a grandfather. And so
what's your granddad name?
Bubba. It's a little more country than I would like. We were going for Budley, but the first grandchild gets naming rights.
That's right.
Avery said Bubba, and Bubba stuck. So now the 4-year-old Avery is a big sister to a twin brother and sister. So we have 10-month-old twins, and we have 4-year-old. And thankfully they live close. But that's part of the legacy piece now,
absolutely.
Right? Not just because they share my last name, but because when I think about if we're not making an impact in our family, it doesn't matter if we're making an impact in the world. First there, we are very active in our church, and my wife works in the children's area. I help our small group ministry and just volunteer in that role and doing some teaching and leading in our small groups. Part of the legacy piece that I'm learning right now is change doesn't happen in large group settings. Transformation happens in solitude and silence, in the moments that we're alone, and in the moments we're in individual one-on-one time with a mentor, friend, therapist, pastor, or small groups.
Yeah.
So that's even like 2025 when I think about what I'm supposed to do in 2025. What will be my legacy for 2025? It's going to be showing up in smaller and smaller ways.
Yeah.
But more intimate and more significant ways.
Right.
So pride rears its ugly head often in my life. But I don't need to be as famous as I thought I used to have to be famous. So I'm talking to a political junkie. But if we went back into the Beach High School class of 85 and saw all the people that said, remember me when you're president, because that was my aspiration in 1984 and 85. And now I'm thankful that that is no longer an aspiration. I'm going to leave that to you younger, more idealistic folks. And but anyways, just plugging into small groups, deeper relationships.
Let's talk a little bit about, you alluded to you're just referral based. And I think in the age of AI and tech, this kind of digital age that we're in, I think a lot of people honestly would sit back and think, how in the world are you making a living by not paying for leads? And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think, I do think that is in 2024, almost 2025, a lot of people in our industry may not have that same philosophy. So I'm just curious, and I know the answer to this, obviously, but or
do you?
Well, what's the reason for that? Why not go out and spend thousands of dollars on leads? How have you been successful not doing it that way?
And I've tried everything, and I have paid for leads, and I have paid for marketing to strangers. I generally refer to marketing now in real estate as either stranger marketing or referral marketing. So I do spend money for my business,
Right?
but I'm trying to throw as much as I can at the people that already know, like, and trust me.
That's right.
So any good relationship-based sales book out there, we refer to Ninja Selling a lot. It's a great relationship-based sales model, and it's all about know, like, and trust. So that's, if I have to change that, I probably will not be in the industry. It's where I'm at now. But I believe that the more information that we have out there, the less trusting that information is. And now, even this morning, I was reading the number of folks your age that get their information from social media. So you can say, well, you can't trust the news channels, so you trust social media more. Both are wrong most of the time, right? Sure. And we all come with our biases. So I kind of want to know your story. So it's easier for me to learn your story if we already have some sort of relationship. So there sometimes we just have a transaction in our business. Those aren't near as fun,
right?
For me, if I don't get to know your story along the way. So I'm going to stick with the relationship model.
Yeah. And
I'll go greet people at Walmart if it doesn't work, and do relationship that way. Yeah. So I want to spend the rest of my life doing relationships. That's if it works in real estate, I'll keep doing real estate. If not, I'll do something different.
At the end of the day, I think we as humans crave that anyways. And so I don't think AI or any of the other digital tech age stuff is going to replace this.
The loneliness epidemic
Is real.
is real, and AI makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because there's no soul, and that's all we have.
Yeah.
That matters. So now I'm getting off on a tangent, but
That's good.
That's the only thing that's eternal. That the rest of it returns to dust.
So as you kind of reflect on the last 30-ish years of your professional career.
Over half my life.
Yeah.
Now is what we're approaching is real estate.
Yeah. So as you kind of look back on that, obviously we've talked about the legacy piece, but also there's an aspect of this where I hope people take away lessons in leadership and life, really. And so for you, when you kind of reflect back on that time, what advice would you give? I'd say, obviously real estate professionals, but also just general, professional advice, leadership advice for, people looking at, entering either the real estate industry or just a leadership role in general.
The things that were important are the things that I overreacted to. The people I tried to fix, those were energies spent in the wrong direction. One of the things that, and we may get to this if I don't talk too much before we wrap up, but one of the things that I was reading this week talked about holy indifference, which I had to step back from, like, wait a minute, something's wrong with that. But then when I dug in, leaned in a little bit, the things that don't matter as much as you thought they mattered,
Right.
is exactly what the next page or two was about.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't matter as much as I thought it did.
Yeah.
So I'm becoming less engaged in, let's pick politics. I used to be tremendously passionate about politics, and I'm not as much. I care,
Sure.
but I more care about people than I care about their political view, because that's not who their identity is.
Right. Exactly.
But there was a time where a lot of my identity was tied that way. It's not who I am.
Yeah.
So the things that I thought were important that I might have identified with in the past are not as important. And that's both, even the things I fought for in the real estate industry, other than doing the right thing all the time, everything else is not as important. Like, I thought my way of selling was better than other people's. Their way of selling works as long as they're telling the truth and doing the right thing for the customer. And it's going to look different than my way. So the things that I'm passionate about are, I hope, more important. And the things that are less important, I'm less passionate about.
Yeah. That's good. Couple things as we kind of wrap up here. I can't end this episode without talking about what's right here on the table.
That's remarkable that you bring that up. Oh, wait, that's bad joke.
So, for those of you that don't know Bud, he has used a legal pad to take notes and
religiously
to lists,
dangerously religiously.
I mean, I guess your whole
27 years of legal pads. Every weekday has I have a different yellow sheet for every day of the week for 27 years and one for the weekend.
Yeah.
So 6 pages per day
Times
for 52 weeks for 27 years.
Where are they stored? I mean, you got them
Some have been digitally downloaded,
Okay.
thanks to Heather, my right hand,
There you go.
at the office. But there are several years that are in file cabinets that my wife would love to burn and probably need to be burned. But now, thanks to Matt Herriman and his, I don't know what Remarkable's paying him to share their story.
Yeah.
But now there's my day today and the day tomorrow. So
I love it.
thank you, sir. Man,
So, hey, an old dog can learn new tricks.
it's the nicest thing that's been said about me all day today is that I'm an old dog.
No, I think I kind of do wear that as like a badge of honor because.
Well, Weston, you got Weston on board.
I mean, I
Like,
really
think
should. We need to get them to be a show
Yeah.
sponsor because I've sold a few of them. But yeah, a few months ago I got this Remarkable tablet, and I mean I didn't have it a week, and I was like, Bud George has got to have one of these.
I was at breakfast this morning, and I was showing it off to the guy I was having breakfast with.
And I honestly, I thought there's no way he'll switch. I mean, he's just, but here we are.
Here we are.
I love it. But so as we wrap up, I'd love to know, and I'm sure listeners would too. What are you currently reading or doing to further your personal growth and development?
I was not a reader for 50 years of my life. Probably wanted to be a reader the last 20 years of my life and would tell you that I wanted to read 12 books a year or something like that. And now I am on the opposite extreme, and I'm trying to keep up with my wife. The number of Amazon packages that she gets delivered, I want to have books. So I ordered 3 books this morning. And it had been a couple weeks since I ordered 3 books. So I'm probably now, I've got 3 or 4 books going right now. I'm teaching a class this next semester at church called The Discerning Life. And that I'm reading a book by that title. Steve Macchia is the author, if I'm pronouncing his last name right. It is all about how we make decisions and slowing down enough not to be caught up in making decisions the way the world makes decisions, but biblically based decisions, and you make those once again, knowledge of Scripture, but also community of people. Surround yourself with people that are wise and help me be aware of the biases that I might be bringing to the decision that aren't healthy biases.
Sure.
So I'm reading a whole bunch on rule of life type stuff. So John Mark Comer is probably my favorite author over the past couple of years. A Relentless Elimination of Hurry, Practicing the Way, most recent book, podcast along those lines. My good friend Phil Herndon, a lot of people know in this town. He was on a podcast, some guys out of Dallas, the Eden Project.
Yeah.
And our Creator made us to walk in perfect unity with Him. And in our brokenness, we have messed that up. In eternity, we're going to be back there. And so what can we do to get back to an Eden-like relationship with our Heavenly Father? The 2 things that Jesus said, love God and love people, sum up the whole Scripture.
Yeah.
And so when we're walking with God in right relationship with Him, then we all of a sudden walk right with His best creation, which is all humanity. So I don't look at people in disdain because they didn't act the way I wanted them to. I look at them through the eyes of their Creator. So I'm reading and listening to how do I better love God and love other people.
Yeah.
I get those 2 things right, everything else falls in line.
Yeah.
So, voracious. Let's use a really big word on a podcast. But I read. One of my goals is an hour a day.
Yeah.
Of reading. So that's usually it's been a good day if I've been up before the sun or pretty close to when the sun rises, and I'm reading a good book.
Love that. But I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on and sharing your heart with me and listeners. And I appreciate your example and your mentorship and ultimately your friendship. So I've really enjoyed this time together. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.